I'm delighted to have this opportunity to get a chance to meet and speak with Kelly Smith. Kelly, you're joining me from the Twin Cities. Is that correct?
Yes, from good old Minneapolis.
Amazing. How is it in Minneapolis right now? We're recording this in the summer of 2024. And what is a Minneapolis summer look and feel like?
Minneapolis summers are actually pretty great. They do get hot, at least in my opinion. Maybe sometimes we touch the 90s, which I'm someone who runs naturally hot. So for me, that's like unbearable. But the thing is a Minneapolis summer is so fun because we just spent so much time being frozen all winter that once you like let us loose out in the sun, we're on lakes, we are doing happy hours, we're going for walks, we're really doing summer right.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. I can only imagine. Have you ever been to Florida in the summer?
I have, and I would die. I've actually even been to Florida in the winter and it was still too hot for me.
Yes, I have a feeling that might be true. Yeah, when you said we almost touched the 90s, I was like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds beautiful.
I know
Oh,
that's like your fall.
that's like our fall, correct? Yeah,
Mhm.
you're exactly right. And I noticed that you're a meditation teacher and a yoga teacher. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Cool. I've been seeing some of your meditation videos on YouTube and I love what you do. How did you get inspired to start creating meditations for people and making it available free on YouTube?
I started doing it actually. I began teaching yoga, and I feel like in my 200-hour teacher training, there wasn't a lot of meditation there. Like we touched a little bit on it, did a little bit of practice, but I didn't know that much about it. And as I started to teach and I heard my students kind of asking a little bit more about meditation, I've always felt like I can't teach something that I don't know. So I personally started diving into meditation. There was a time in which I went and spent a couple of weeks like living with some monks to learn about a specific kind of loving kindness meditation. And I just, maybe it's because I'm neurodivergent and have ADHD, I get these hyper fixations, but I just love to learn. And as I was learning more and more about meditation, I started developing kind of the signature style where I would add a few minutes of kind of guided meditation or guided imagery in Shavasana at the end of my classes. And that's where it really started. And then I had a yoga studio in a past lifetime, almost a decade now at this point. And when I had to leave that because we moved, I actually started recording these guided meditations 7 years ago, putting them on my podcast, Mindful in Minutes, so that I could still share them with my students back in a different part of the US. And then eventually started putting them on YouTube and, all those different places.
Cool. What kind of response are you getting?
I have been getting a really good response. I've been doing it for 7 years, which I feel like, I mean, in podcasting years, that's like geriatric basically. And that's, it's something that I feel so fortunate to get to do. And it's something that's totally changed my life. And YouTube, kind of the YouTube extension is the newer piece of it where I thought, I already have these practices. If I'm putting them on, all the other places, I might as well just convert them to a video and put them on YouTube as well. So yeah, so mostly good.
Yes, very cool. And how important is meditation right now?
Just in general or to
Mhm.
me or
Both.
oh
Like
gosh,
why do we need meditation? And I say right now just because um well, let me just have let you answer the question. We don't have to go into what my right now is. Maybe your right now is perfect bliss. I don't know.
my right now, no, as you know, as you know, and I said, anyone watching on YouTube, you can see I'm in this dark little closet. It's because I'm hiding from my children. So I have a 3-year-old and I had my second child this fall.
Congratulations.
And thank you. But my life is definitely not perfect bliss. And, I've always thought of meditation for me personally. It's kind of this like life raft that I have. And so even, it always keeps me from kind of sinking. And it's something I return to again and again and again when things just get really hard and really tough. And it helps me to not only kind of manage those waves and those ups and downs and not totally get, blasted by waves, but it's also for me, most importantly, the way that I've gotten to know myself. So meditation is single pointed concentration. And so, of course, there's all of these great benefits physically, mentally, emotionally. But personally, for me, it has allowed me to be able to turn inward and to get to know my true self, which I think has completely transformed my life. It's made me a better person, a better mother. It's made me happier. It's also challenged me in ways because the more you get to know yourself, the more you start questioning other things. And it's just this really beautiful value add to my life that I feel like I can incorporate as a little micro habit that has kind of a big bang. So for me personally, it's this thing that just brings me so much life, so much joy, and it's also something I can do quickly and I can fit into a hectic lifestyle like being the primary parent to little kids and trying to run a business and all of those things. But I think on a larger scale as to why do we the collective need meditation, there's so many different answers I want to give. One that I want to give right now is that we are kind of getting these little goldfish brains, myself included. Even though I have ADHD, I feel like we're just so overstimulated all the time. Our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. We have studies now that I believe are saying our attention span is like 6 seconds, down from like 40 seconds when our parents were our
Oh,
age, which is like
interesting.
wild. And
Yeah.
so we need that mental kind of training component, but I also think we need a vehicle to connect with ourselves and to try to find a way to calm the waters. There's just so much going on. Life is a lot. It's busy, it's overstimulating, it's loud, it's scary. And so to be able to hit the pause button and to practice intentional introspection and single pointed concentration, even for a few minutes every day, is something that I think can be extremely transformative.
Nice. Good point. I'd
Yeah.
never heard that stat before about the variation between, say, a 40-second time span to a
Yeah.
second as an average from,
As an,
like you said, our
yeah,
parents to us. That's pretty crazy.
it's
Where,
wild.
I mean, that would indicate then if that trajectory stays on the same track, we get down to 5, 4, 3, 2, a 0 second ability to concentrate on and I that's kind of wild to think about. I know because we are getting
Mhm.
so much information. How do we sift through it all? What is Do
And
you
I
have a
think
strategy for managing your filters? What kind of filters have you kind of created for yourself to help maintain your mental clarity in relation to the amount of information that you take in?
so I try to actually turn to my body first, which is maybe an interesting answer, but I have found that, and if you think about 6 seconds, like that's kind of the average length of a TikTok video, which is this particular study that I was looking at was correlated. And like, I definitely scroll on TikTok. I'm on social media. It's something that I do, but I can like feel it in my body. I feel like I begin to feel like antsy or anxious or constantly need like some kind of stimulus. And I can just physically feel it if I'm engaging in too much of that. And so I try to listen to my body's signals. And when I start to get just those little warning signs, like right after my daughter was born, my baby, I was up all night all the time feeding, and what else do you do other than like randomly purchase stuff on Amazon, when you're up, or, scroll on TikTok or whatever? Because if you do
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
if you try to read or anything like that, you might fall asleep. And I could just feel like my mental health deteriorating, and I was like, "Okay, I need to do less of this," and then I physically can feel myself feeling better, not feeling so antsy, not feeling so anxious, not feeling so, like, amped all the time. So I tend to listen to my body, and when it starts saying, "Ooh, I don't know," then I recognize that enough is enough, and I start taking breaks. I'm not like a big cut it all out person, but
Mhm.
definitely, start reining it in.
Yeah, similar. I would agree with that. That's really good strategy, good advice. What are your thoughts on the consumption of information in relation to, like you said, you can notice like physically you'll get some sort of reaction like that you're just like getting a little bit like uncomfortable. And I think when I look at my phone and I catch myself like did I get a new follower? Did I, what was that comment over there? That type of thing. And then I can sense my like addictive wanting to like do that again and then go back to the other platform and look again and then go. And so with that being said, when you decide I'm putting phone down, And how do you explain what happens mentally for you in that sort of absence? That like when you recognize that you do like it's kind of
Mhm.
fun. It can be really fun, right? It's like
Yeah.
you can learn a lot and you can interact and communicate. Um, is there because I it does feel good to be in silence and it does feel
Mhm.
good to have no stimulation, but sometimes no stimulation feels unnerving. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience with that?
Yeah, and you know what? I would say that most people would not agree with you that silence and not having stimulus feels good. I think you're in the minority because something I hear all the time and like the kind of the whole premise of my podcast are like short guided meditations. I like to think I'm like people's meditation gateway drug and I happily wear
Mm,
that badge
I like that.
because I
Like a
love
seven-second meditation.
or just,
Like,
even if it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
5 minutes or 10 minutes, like rarely do you find anything, you know, 20 minutes or above on my podcast, unless it's like a
yeah,
full yoga nidra practice or something.
yeah,
But that's because that's all we really need. Like studies tell us, like even 8 to 12 minutes. So I say 10 minutes a day is enough. But I
mhm,
think often people feel there's a high barrier to entry for meditation because they feel like they have to do it for a long time. They have to sit crisscross applesauce, do all these specific things, and you don't. But what I hear from people is often they'll say, "Oh, I tried meditation and I hated it." And I love when people tell me that because I'm like, "Oh, tell me more. Like, what did you hate about it?" Or people say, "Oh, I could never meditate because, oh, I'm so ADD, my brain is so scattered." I'm like, "Oh, tell me more." Like as someone who both has ADHD and a meditation teacher, I'm like, "Tell me more." And I so many people are and I used to feel this way. I even used to be I'm a reformed shavasana skipper. Like when I was young and I was doing yoga classes, I was like, "Oh, shavasana, what a waste." And I'd roll up my mat and I'd walk out the door. I'm reformed now. But I used to feel that way where I was like, "What is the point?" And I
yeah,
never got it until a teacher finally explained to me like the purpose. And I think for so many people, not having a stimulus is really hard and really uncomfortable. And then when you're just by yourself, it's like they say, quiet the mind and the soul shall speak, but it's really like quiet the mind and everything starts yelling at you. And you start, having to be with your own thoughts, be with your own feelings. And that can be really scary and uncomfortable too. So I think a lot of people resist that alone time and that stimulus free time because then what's left? Just you and your true feelings and your true thoughts and your potential discomfort or struggles or challenges. And I think we have a tendency to be a little bit avoidant when it comes to that area of
mm,
life.
I would agree with
Um,
you.
yeah, but I personally love quiet and silence and being alone. And I, consider myself like an outgoing introvert. So I personally have found that when I do find myself being overstimulated or engaging in too much social media, or like you said, like sometimes the numbers, it's that instant gratification, whether it's social media or you log in, you look at your podcast, you're like, oh my gosh, look how well this episode's performing, or these numbers. There is that instant gratification. But at the end of the day, it's just an external part of you. Like what's left if, you know, podcasting went away or, as we're recording this, right, we're in the middle of like airline meltdowns, which I was affected by. So
I
it's
just
fresh
heard
on my I
about
just got stranded in Boston for a few days unintentionally. But like, what if some IT thing happens and the podcast was gone? Then what's
Mm,
left? And
mm.
so trying to recognize like what is kind of this nice like instant gratification or like feel good thing, but then what's actually like a part of me. And the more that I've gotten to know myself, the easier it is to just sit and be with myself and my own existence instead of kind of chasing these external bits of validation or gratification or stimulus.
Yes, wonderful, great answer. I'm curious how you balance secularized meditation with either faith or spiritually based meditation. Where do you implement and deliver or teach, and how do you teach in relation to that?
I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question before. So I
Do,
really, I really appreciate it.
does it make sense though? Because I feel like if you meditation and prayer can be so synonymous and unique in their own ways, but also so similar. And I'm just curious how. And I know it's a personal question because perhaps you don't
Yeah.
want to speak about religion. Like, there's certain things we're not supposed to talk about. Like, we don't want to, definitely, we're not going to talk about politics. I'm sorry. I'm gonna say
No, no, thank you.
no. Money, you're not supposed to talk about, and religion, right? Like, you just don't, just let people do what they want to do, and don't push them. But so if you don't want to go there, I totally understand. But I'm more,
No, I'm happy to go there.
I think sometimes, like sometimes religiously oriented people might think that meditation is a bad thing because it might infiltrate their current spiritual practice. And then sometimes people that are more atheistically orientated don't want to go into a meditation class that has some spiritually angled concepts. And so I'm curious what way you approach and kind of mediate this all.
Okay, so I'm kind of at what I'm hearing from you, and let me know if I'm hearing this correctly. So the question is, not only how do I navigate being a meditation teacher, and then if that maybe um, feels to be in conflict with certain students' beliefs or my own beliefs, how do I navigate that as a teacher? What does that mean to me personally, and how maybe can we find the sweet spot or the personal intersection between the practice of meditation being single pointed concentration and then maybe our own like spiritual beliefs? Is that right?
Perfect analysis.
Okay,
Yes.
amazing. Okay, amazing. So, I'm so happy to go here with you on this topic because when I said I owned a yoga studio, the part that I left out was I owned a yoga studio in a one bar, one Walmart town. Well, there's like three bars and one Walmart because, priorities, right? You need more than one bar. And in rural Missouri, it would have been like it was from 2018, yeah, 2016 to 2018. Anyways, one bar, one Walmart town in rural Missouri. There were no yoga studios. When I first moved there and I had lived in Minneapolis the first time, and my eyes were really opened to this discussion. I remember I was asked to teach a kids meditation class at the local library, and I brought this book. It's called Peaceful Piggy Meditation, which anyone who teaches kids yoga, it's actually a great, pick it up on Amazon. It'll be a great add to one of your kids' classes. The kids love it. And I was told that I could not use that book because I couldn't use the word meditation because it was against the organizers' beliefs and a lot of the kids, their families' beliefs. And this really opened my eyes because I had never heard this before. And I was young and, I needed my eyes to be opened as well as to, there's different beliefs out there. And I was like, okay, well, if I can't use the word meditation, I can certainly still talk about the concept of single pointed concentration. This book in particular is kind of talking about, using simple meditation for emotion regulation, like in a child. And so I just started swapping the word meditation for, intentional breathing or,
Mhm. Nice. Yeah.
being present with your feelings. I just started subbing it for other things. And I
Cool.
had many people coming up as well, adults saying, "Oh, yoga is against my religious beliefs." And I ended up having this discussion at the beginning, almost a decade ago, at the beginning of my teaching career with a lot of my students. And what I landed on, and I still teach this way, whether it be yoga or meditation, and this, question comes up, is that meditation itself is single pointed concentration. So it's like if your mind is a light bulb, when you're practicing just mindfulness or being present, you're turning that light bulb up all the way and the light is just illuminating whatever you're doing. Meditation is taking that light bulb and turning it to a laser pointer and focusing it on one thing. It could be your breath. It could be, a mantra, or even if we're uncomfortable with that word, it could be a positive phrase. It could be
Mm.
visualizing something, whatever it is. But you get to choose what your point of concentration is and what your intention is for meditation. So if you feel like your meditation practice and your religious beliefs don't necessarily coincide, that's perfectly fine. Have breath be your point of concentration and then have a separate space where you can then have your devotional practice or your time with your spiritual beliefs.
Yes.
Or if you're someone who, you don't want any religion into your life, you can apply the same thing where you're taking all of that mental focus, you're taking that light bulb, turn it to a laser pointer, and then you decide where you point it. But you also, like for me personally, my answer to this is I find the sweet spot is like kind of weaving my own personal beliefs, which I don't have necessarily a definition. I feel like I'm, still on a journey every day as to like What do I believe? What is the meaning of
Yeah,
life? But the
I
more that I
agree.
get to know
I agree on that.
myself,
Yeah.
yeah, the more that I get to know myself, the more that, I get to know kind of what I believe or what interests me. So I find meditation to be a really great way to also explore my personal beliefs. But I think it's very, very possible and very easy. Like there's no bit of, religion or anything in the meditations that I create for my work. But you can basically infuse as much or as little religious belief or spirituality or anything into your meditation practice because you're just taking your light bulb, turning it to a laser pointer and pointing it at something. But
Yes.
I personally believe that prayer is a form of meditation where you're pointing that laser at, your time to be with whatever it is that you believe. Um, but if you don't believe that, that's perfectly fine too.
Very cool. I love it. Well, I can
Yeah.
see why and how you would be able to fit in then into the town you're in Missouri and create an open space where you're making it welcoming for people and able to communicate with them and not this kind of closed mind, sort of thing. And I always associate the meditation community and or the world of meditation as being a fairly open kind of circle, of belief and that it can help that. And it's amazing, like with the way you're explaining it, it's really amazing how you can direct it and blend it and pull it into your current practices and not really have anything bad happen. Only, and in my opinion, only good. Have you ever had or heard of any bad experiences from meditation? Like, have you ever heard anybody like what truly bad? Like, I believe like sometimes things seem bad in the moment. Like you go and you go sit, you have a full meltdown, you have an emotional experience, and you might come out and go, gosh, that was horrible. I just really don't like doing that. That's really tumultuous. But then a year goes by and you look back and you go, oh wow, I was really processing some heavy stuff. And that actually was a really positive thing. And I've grown from that experience. But like, I mean, I've never heard anybody like they've never broken a bone. I've never heard anybody have an accident, like anything. I know the legs can get tingly when you're sitting in Padmasana, or if you are going crisscross applesauce, maybe you'll feel a little tingling. But as soon as you undo your legs, like, no, I've never heard of anybody losing a leg or anything. What about you? Has there ever been anything bad that has ever come out of meditation in your experience of practice and teaching?
My initial answer is no. My second answer is that kind of depends what your definition of
Mhm.
bad is. I
Good point.
do think that one thing that I do caution people against, and a couple of things. To go back to what you're saying about, trying to have an open mind with my community when I was teaching. I think as a yoga teacher, it's our job to serve our students and to meet our students where we're at and not kind of have this attitude of like, oh, I'm going to take these people who just don't understand meditation and bring them to my level. Like, I think that's just such like an icky way to do it.
Yes.
It's my job. I have these tools in my toolbox. It's my job to then show people how to utilize the tools in their life. And that's just my personal belief. I think we're here to serve our students and meet them where they're at, not be like, "Oh, let me elevate you, through my knowledge." It's like, ugh, I don't know. I don't like that very much.
Agree with you.
But okay, well, amazing. And I think that one thing that I do caution people against, I also think it's important when we teach people to know our scope of practice and what we are equipped to handle, what we are not equipped to handle. If someone is struggling with their mental health or they are needing support from probably a professional, I will have people that will send me an email. And again, it kind of depends on what your definition of quote bad is, but I'll have people that will email me and will sometimes say, I'm working, I'm hearing these voices and it's not to discredit anything that this person is experiencing, but I read that and I'll respond to them and say, "Hey, like I'm just a meditation teacher. Like I don't feel like I have the tools in my toolbox. That's outside of my scope. You know, can I help you find someone who does know how to support you in this way?" And so that's the only time that I've heard of someone maybe having a quote bad experience is when they were potentially looking for meditation to solve a problem that probably would have been best supported through professional medical help. But that can be hard to kind of decipher for yourself, especially when you're in, a tough mental state. But that's the only time that I have ever heard of someone having a quote bad experience is they just weren't getting the support that they needed. And meditation is so wonderful and beautiful, but I will never tell someone like, don't see your doctor, don't see a mental health professional, like stop your treatment plan and just meditate. Like it's such a beautiful complementary practice to what you're doing with professionals. Um, but I would never recommend someone like, throw caution to the wind and give up on everything and not listen to science and just meditate everything away. Um, but that's such a specific case.
Yeah. Ooh, well said. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's so important. And especially as yoga teachers or meditation teachers, where we understand our scope of practice. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'm really happy that you're giving credit toward the need for mental health counseling and to break down the barriers that seeking help is a symbol of weakness and that I am unable to ask for help. So I'm glad that you're putting the laser beam on that for a minute. That's so important. And we do hear continuously stats about the decline of mental health. And it's interesting if we were to correlate the lack of ability to concentrate moving from 40 seconds to 6 and the increase of mental health issues in our country and or world. It does seem like and I like that you're also bringing up the fact too that like my first when I asked you that question was like just looking at it from this angle of like you just can't go wrong. Just try meditation. Meditation is only really going to help you out. But it's so true what you're saying. If we're in a really, really challenging place and we're seeking assistance, we're probably going to need a couple of different tools and not just one. And the combination of tools can help. On that same analogy, if we do have a toolbox, and imagine your meditation techniques are the tools in the toolbox, and you have like say 10 different tools in the toolbox, but there's one or two or three tools that you kind of always grab when you go to your toolbox. What are your meditation technique tools that you seem to kind of keep going back to? And you mentioned one like going back to your body, feeling your body. Can you expound a little bit about maybe some of your other like key tools that you employ?
Yes. So breath is one like, and I'm talking very, very simple breath. 3 deep, easy breaths. You'll hear me all the time at the beginning of meditation. Take 3 deep, easy breaths or slow down your breath. Become aware of your breath. Every practice that I do, I almost always start with, even if it's just a couple breaths, because of the ability for slowing down our breath and becoming aware of it, the impact that it has on our nervous system. And so I feel that, well, I feel very strongly that you can't really do anything on a deeper level until you get your body out of fight or flight. So I worked on a book recently. It's called You Are Not Your Thoughts. It's a 8-week meditation book and journal for anxiety. And while I was working on that book and doing research, I really was diving into like the nervous system and how truly our bodies are designed to survive, right? So fight or flight by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It gets a bad rap. It becomes an issue when we're chronically in fight or flight, but it's really important and it is a survival mechanism when we experience it in the short term when there's an actual threat. But the problem is we get into this chronic fight or flight and then it becomes a domino effect and before you know it everything's dysregulated. We're having this chronic anxiety. So I almost always start with just a tiny bit of breath because that helps to get the body out of fight or flight. And without that, it's really hard to do anything deeper. We're not going to take a conscious journey to your true self if you are just in survival mode physically. So, a few breaths, again, checking in with the body. So, feeling it. How does my body actually feel? We're in our heads all day long, even if we don't necessarily practice meditation and mindfulness. We're always up in our thoughts, but it's like, wait a minute, what does my body say? Whatever. There's that meme where it's like, hot girls have anxiety and tummy aches or whatever. And it's like, but why? Why do I have an upset stomach? What is going on? Tuning into the body. Why am I feeling stressed? And checking in physically, emotionally, mentally. Like, so I guess to answer your question, a couple few deep breaths, checking in with the body, the mind, and your emotions, I find is so powerful. And then I love imagery. And I it's something where I love to tell a story and I love to also be like brought on a journey. And so I'll do a lot of, imagery or pull from places that I've traveled. And I do this a lot being people's, meditation gateway drug. I think it's also easier to follow a guided practice that takes you on a little bit more of a story or a journey as opposed to saying, okay, breathe in, notice the moment between the inhale and the exhale, and then just keep doing that for 10 minutes.
Mm,
I think, that's just asking people
yes.
with our little from somebody who also has a hamster brain. It's just asking us to go, have that, the wheels start turning instead of giving people a little bit more guidance. So I love to use more imagery and kind of walk people through a practice and then weave different elements from different disciplines into those practices.
Nice. Very cool. Now, if there's still 10 tools and we pulled out the first three, but there's one that you have in that toolbox, like for a just in case scenario, like a real random situation, and you're not teaching and you're
Mhm.
doing self practice, and you mentioned, I liked how you said, I don't know if I'll nail it or say it the same way you said, but like, like having a deep journey of the self, like if your mind and body is like kind of out of whack and you're hanging on for dear life, having some sort of aha mystical experience is going to take a little time to kind of maybe work into. Is there something that you do that's a little deeper that kind of helps
Yes.
you for your own personal experience?
I love to ask for guidance from my true self, my highest self, and also my guides or anyone. I'll kind of just open it up and especially when I struggle and I'm having a hard time, or if I'm trying to like something that, there's a lot of noise of on online is being a parent, right? You can even down to my baby recently started eating solid foods. And so there's all these different philosophies as to how you should introduce solids to your baby. And no matter which one you take, the other camps will say that that's a horrible idea and you're going to, damage your baby for forever. And there's a lot of noise. And so the the tool that I pull out of my toolbox personally the most to have a deeper experience is, quiet the body, try to quiet the mind, and then just ask for guidance and clarity. So it could even be something of, introducing solids to the baby and sitting there being like, okay, how do I actually feel about this?
Mm,
Can you help me cut through the noise? Or maybe I'm, sitting there feeling uninspired or I just want general guidance or I'll say, "Hey, guides." My guides happen to be kind of funny. I'll be like, "Guides, like, is there anything that I need to know?" And having a conversation with kind of those deeper parts of myself, that's one of my favorite tools that I'll pull out whenever I need it, and it just always feels good to me.
yes. Great answer. I love that advice. I feel like in that process of asking for guidance on some level is such a nice key little turn to actually ask and be receptive and wait to kind of see what comes up. That's so cool. I like that.
Oh,
Gonna
do you like
definitely
to talk
try.
to your guides, or are you not a guides guy?
mm, ooh, good question. I'm was a guide guy.
Mhm.
And I went no guide guy, and I'm
Okay.
returning back into the guide guy phase. So I feel like I've traversed both landscapes fairly well and tumultuously at the same time. And now I'm having so much relief feeling it's okay to ask for help again, and but I went through a very kind of like no, I can figure this out myself and I don't need to ask for assistance. And because I'm not sure if the assistance is there or not, is it really there? Is it me just so now I'm actually saying, yes, there is guidance. And even if it's just me asking you for some help, right? Like even if it's not in a silent space, but me saying, Kelly, can you help me out with this or something? I think that's been a big one for me to start to kind of feel okay with asking for some help.
Yeah.
It's
No, I
amazing.
think
I mean,
that's huge.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
I
that's huge,
agree. I'm glad you
and I
brought it
think
up.
for anyone asking for help is hard. I personally don't have the lived experience of someone who like identifies as being male or a man, but I have heard from my students that it can be especially hard to ask for help when you're a man. Do you feel that that's true?
I love that you're kind of asking that because, yeah, I would say absolutely. I think there's certain gender normalities that we're associated with our, with our certain roles that we've fallen into. And that's why I think it's so fascinating to ask that question and start to even identify or pick out, be able to pick up on what do I identify with and what am I unaware of and what can I become aware of. So, I do see that. I kind of tend to think it's probably pretty equal for both, but just a little uniquely different for both. So, in the sense that I think we share so much in common as male and female. And at the same time, yeah, I do have, obviously, we have very specific things to each of our genders, but
Yeah.
um, I like exploring that. I do
Yeah.
like to try to dig in on it is that because of the my male gender that I'm having a hard time asking because I've always been told I should just man up and just be strong and just like force it down and don't cry and push on, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that probably is a part of it. And then also when I start to investigate familial growing up patterns, like the stuff we went through as kids, oh,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
whole nother quagmire. So, um, you know,
Yes.
what about you? Where are you landing on your gender identity and the roles that come into play as a mom and or just as a basic human being? Or not just basic human, but like an
Yeah.
amazing human being, or however you
Oh.
want. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like to say
I
basic,
am
is
so
like
I
putting
you know
something
what? I
very
am somewhat basic as a 30-something Midwestern mom who loves fall and a good pumpkin spice latte. I
all
am a
right.
little bit basic,
Yay.
but,
Yeah,
you know,
a good thing.
I well, just the way my personal identity, I identify as a woman, but I think and I don't think that's necessarily what you were asking. I think you're asking more about,
Okay.
the deeper meaning, but I have been thinking a lot about this now that I have 2 children. I have a son and I have a daughter. And I don't know if I necessarily have any answers, but I have found myself being more intentional and trying to pay more attention to how am I how am I raising these 2 children differently and why? And are there moments where, certain behaviors my son who is a toddler, he's working through a hitting phase, which, if anyone's had like a 3-year-old who's working through a hitting phase, it is just like it is a journey to go on. But even that, I think, do I perceive that differently because it's a boy hitting versus a girl? And I've been trying to just be a little bit more honest with myself, more intentional with, I guess, unlearning and relearning different like gender norms and how, I was raised and versus how my husband was raised because, we're really close in age. And so our parents are similar in age and just kind of deconstructing a lot of that. And when I became a mom, there were so many things that I felt like I had blind spots to, especially to like the male experience because I had sisters, I just kind of was always around like women. And then I had this son and I was like, I don't really know what to like, I don't know how to raise a boy. I don't know how to be a good supportive, mother figure to a man. I've never really like seen that in my life. And it's really led me to unlearn and relearn some different things. And so I think a lot about just that experience. And I think I'm only at like the contemplative stage where I think about it. And I always say that our kids are like our mirrors, where, not only do they reflect things back at you, for example, last night, my dog, Mila, who we love, but she is a barker and the older she gets, she's 11 now. If she wants to bark, she's gonna bark. There's nothing you can do. And sometimes you have to kind of like yell at her. You just have to be like, Mila, enough. You have to be like, enough. And then she'll finally stop. And my son, immediately after, he goes, Mila, enough. And then he looks at me and he goes, Mom yelled really loud. And
Mm,
and
yeah.
he wasn't trying to like read me to filth in a way, but he kind of did because he was right by me. And I was like, wow. And so he was like reflecting that behavior back to me. But also, our kids can be that mirror, like that super like 20x that they put in like the hotel rooms where it, like magnifies you so close, where you're like, oh my gosh, is that actually like what I look like? Who needs like a
That's what my
20x
pores
mirror?
look like. Yeah.
Yes, but it's like in every hotel room. And you're like, why does every hotel need this thing? but they can magnify these things that you didn't even know existed within yourself. And so I always think of our children as like our mirror. And so I really do think about these things and how they're different experiences for men versus women. And I found it became harder to ask for help when I became a mom because I think I internalized, in society that a quote good mom just knows how to do it, just knows how to do it all. Like a
Mm,
good mom is just effortless, which is like
yeah,
such baloney.
yeah,
But that's what I feel like I had internalized. And so I
yeah.
had to work on that.
Excellent. Ooh, yeah. I like that you're a fan of wanting to work on it.
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit of, I love that you said neurodivergent before
Yeah.
you said ADHD in the early part of our conversation. And can you talk a little bit about your journey? I'm guessing you might have had a diagnosis at some point that you are, say, probably your diagnosis came first with ADHD, and then
Yeah.
now more modernly, we're having different terms for different diagnoses, and therefore neurodivergence. Awesome. I mean, I
Yeah.
love that. I like I love the creativity of the changes of the, because it gets our
Mhm.
minds to kind of see things differently as opposed to like,
Yeah.
I heard one recently. I saw this horrible storyline about what's going on in Baltimore about this drug that's even more powerful than fentanyl called Trank, which is like elephant tranquilizer, and what it's doing to people, and what it's actually like the physical and the whole effect of all of it on people. How horrific it is! It's really bad. And but they're shifting it from look at these addicts out on the street to substance use disorder. You know, these people have
Mhm.
substance use disorder. And it just got me to kind of think a little differently that like instead of like spinning something negatively on this person that's going through this very difficult thing, that we could potentially see that they are struggling and that the substance itself could be so powerful that they don't have the ability to say no. It's like so gripping and so that's a little off where we were started, but where I started was like
Mhm.
your experience with neurodivergence and ADHD. Can you talk a little bit about your own personal experience?
Yeah, and I love again, ADHD. I love a good tangent. But yeah, I really love what you just said.
Maybe I
No, I
am.
do.
I think I
No, I don't.
might.
I mean, maybe. I
Yeah.
actually think that kind of being neurotypical is actually the minority. Like, if you think about how the brain works, everyone's brain is so different and so unique. So, like, I think the more we learn about it, I imagine it's more of like a spectrum that it's not like a light
Yeah.
switch where it's like either the neurodivergent switch is on or off. It's like our brains are so different, just like our bodies are all different. Every aspect of us is so different. So, really, what is like neurotypical? I don't know. To go back to what you're saying about, is it trank?
Yeah.
Trank? Oh, that
Frank,
even just sounds
does that sound
ugh.
nasty? Yeah.
Okay, but what someone, shared with me the other day, because I really believe in sharing, not shaming. So what someone, shared with me the other day, I was so grateful, is that, they were saying instead of describing someone as homeless, you say, someone currently experiencing homelessness
Mm,
or,
that's a good one. Yeah. To see
yeah.
it as like a
And
label of
that
their
really stuck with
identity,
me.
but that's a good one.
Yes, that they aren't a homeless person. They're a person who's currently experiencing
Experiencing it.
homelessness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that one really stuck with me too, I think for, similar reasons of really putting, like, the person first instead of the circumstances, that they found themselves in. But, it's interesting because I have both ADHD and dyslexia, and I did get an ADHD diagnosis when I was young, like 5th grade, and this would have been, like, in the '90s, and I didn't get the dyslexia, diagnosis really, until I was an adult. But it all makes a lot more sense now of how those 2 kind of, work together. And I felt like as a kid, growing up in the '90s, especially being again, back to being a woman, but I think at the time, we thought that a kid with ADHD was like this really rambunctious, like, boy who was really loud and would interrupt the teacher and be really boisterous. And and I wasn't that, but I was really struggling to learn in, like, a conventional school system. And my sister is the opposite. She is amazing at school and is so, scholarly, and, I think there's so many different kinds of intelligences. So I don't even want to say, she was so smart and I wasn't, but like she's just phenomenal at school. Always has been. And so I think, and she's my older sister, so I think people, they would compare the two of us and be like, "Well, why is your sister's so good at school and so, you know, excellent at it and you are, struggling to learn to read, things like that. And we didn't know that much about neurodivergence, even ADHD. There's such a narrow scope as to like, what it actually looks like in a child. And so it was both helpful to get a diagnosis when I was young and also extremely hard because, I was made fun of. People just assumed that I was like lazy. They would label me as like dumb, that I wasn't going to become anything. And now in hindsight, I realize that it's actually how my brain works differently is what makes me so good at what I do. And so even if I felt like, a quote failure in school, I feel like once I was done with school and I just was kind of given the freedom to just live an adult life, like that's when I started to thrive. And I don't know. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say
Yes.
it started really, really hard. And now it feels kind of like really special and a really unique part of me that does bring me challenges. Like if you see the clutter in my home and it drives me nuts, I have such a desire to not have clutter in my home, but my ADHD just seems to not let me out of that, clutter. And I do the thing. And maybe if you're trying to self-diagnose yourself with ADHD, do you leave glasses of water all over the place? That's a common ADHD thing. So you'll get a glass of water, you'll drink some of it, you set it down and get distracted, you forget where you left it, or you can't remember if it's yours, and you get another. That's like one of those random ADHD things. Do you do that?
Well, the funny thing is just the other day I have 2 children. They had
Yeah.
friends over, and I swear there was 20 water cups out, all in the same size cup, and I'm like, "Whose cup is whose?" And I was just like, "Let me water the plants with all these cups and just start over.
Yes.
Put them all in the dishwasher, let's start over." I don't know if it was all me or if it was all them. I think it was
Yeah.
them. So I don't think that was me, but maybe my children. I don't know. I'm gonna keep a closer
I
eye
don't
on this
know.
because why did I have 20 water cups all over the house?
Keep
That's
okay,
hilarious.
yes.
No,
It's a
you're giving
real
me some clues.
thing.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
so funny.
also
I love hearing about it
yes.
because
Well,
I've
yeah.
never thought of myself as that, but I've had people tell me like, Todd, just stay on track, and love to
Mhm.
go all over the place. So, but I have started opening that my doorway to just like, when you get that feeling of like, maybe I do, maybe I am. It's
Yep.
kind of a cool thing because things start to come together. And I don't know that it makes life all of a sudden perfect just because like, oh, I do have this kind of weird thing about me, but different thing about me, I should say. But I love that's why I like to ask you and just hear your experience so I can relate. Um, what about I won't if you decide to tell me your interaction with prescription medication and how that's
Mhm.
evolved for you, I'd love to hear about it, but I know that's a very personal question. But
No, I'll share
and
it.
yeah, okay. I'd like to
Yeah.
know what was your journey with then at a fifth grade level? There's a
Mhm.
potential they prescribe something. Do you still
Yep.
utilize help or on that level from pharmaceuticals? Where are you at
Yeah.
with all this?
So I have not used any. I took a drug, Concerta. I think it was, it was so up and coming, like whatever, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I started taking it a low dose. It would have been in middle school. And I think it really did help me in kind of a traditional school setting in middle school and in high school. I stopped taking it in college because I did have some side effects that weren't great. It made me feel anxious, made me a little bit like sweaty. I was a sweaty girl because of it. And once I was in college, my schedule was just really different. Like I would only have classes on certain days of the week. I only had to, kind of be dialed in for like a short amount of time. And I just found like the you know, the the side effects kinda outweighed the benefit at that time in that situation, but I did find it to be helpful in middle school and in high school, and I took, Concerta all through that, and then I've never revisited it because I never really thought about it, and then I think when prescription medication for ADHD became trendy, we'll say, again, I was in a, either trying to have a baby, being pregnant, or breastfeeding a baby stage, which I still am in that kinda cycle, and so I wouldn't even pursue it, just because I don't think you can, you should be taking, you know
Of
they don't
course.
recommend you take it if you're
Understood.
pregnant or breastfeeding, and
Absolutely.
but I also I'm sometimes curious where I'm like, well, it's been so long since I've taken anything for it. Also, I'm sure the treatment is different than what it was in like, 2001 or whatever. But for me personally, I still don't know if the pros would outweigh the cons because I have just learned how to personally manage my ADHD in a way that works for me. And so I think getting to know myself in the way that like I work best has been the best remedy for me, especially now I have an unconventional job. My schedule is unique. I did, however, a few months after the birth of my second baby, ask my mom who comes and helps with childcare and is just like, an angel on earth. And I was like, I don't know if I'm just too sleep deprived, if I'm having like this really bad ADHD flare up, or if I'm getting early onset dementia because it all kind of feels the same to me. And I was kind of like, I wonder if when I'm done breastfeeding this baby, if
Mm,
maybe I should consider it again.
what?
But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's really just that's my journey. It's not anything too profound. I also sometimes am a little nervous of starting something that could potentially be habit forming. And
Yeah.
so I always think, would the benefit outweigh the risks or the side effects? And I just think right now in my life, I don't feel that way, but I leave the door open to it if I felt like the potential benefit could outweigh any
Yes.
risk.
That's a very balanced way to approach it. I think you're on the right track.
Well, I mean, don't you worry? Maybe it's just me, but sometimes I worry where I'm like,
Oh,
I don't like. I never want to get too
I can relate to
overboard with
everything you just said.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
and I I have I struggled with disordered eating and I guess trigger warning, but I won't get really too into it. But in college, that was something that like I really struggled with, and in my early 20s, and so I know that I have the possibility to take things to an extreme level. And I just feel like don't play with fire. Like if I don't need it,
Yeah. Yeah.
then
I'm
don't do
with
it.
you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I go up against that thought all the time. I do
Mhm.
utilize medical services. Like I go and get checked out, and
Yeah.
I believe in that medicine and the medical
Yes.
community has improved our
Mhm.
existence as human beings on
Yeah.
planet Earth 100%. That's my own belief. But I still tread cautiously when I'm, offered, hey, try this for this situation. And I'm always like, yeah, and I start reading side effects and I'm like, oh no, I don't know which one sounds better or worse. If I'd
Okay, I
rather
should
suffer the
say
effects of not using or suffer the effects of using, which
yes.
way balance the scales. And it's challenging. I think I don't like to clump everybody into the everybody category, but I think everybody's going through that on some level, like on
Yeah.
some level with something, trying to find balance. And that's why I
Yes. And
love
I
that our focus is around the meditation piece because I've found personally that's been an incredible part of finding balance since but what I didn't want to interrupt you. You were going to say something. What were you
Oh,
thinking?
I was just going to say my little caveat. So I am married to a doctor. And so we sometimes have little, spicy conversations about things, but where, my husband and I have kind of landed is that the sweet spot is really where, whether you want to say like east meets west or whatever it is, that his perception is always like I've seen on the back end, how much effort and knowledge you have to acquire to become a doctor, that it has made me, really respect the profession, but also medicine is still, subjective in a way. My husband works in, hospital, works with very, very sick people, and there will be multiple doctors that will have different opinions on maybe what the best treatment course will be. And it may not be that one is right and one is wrong. Maybe they both have different elements where right, but there is still a subjective piece of medicine. But something that I think is really cool and, where my husband and I have kind of fallen into agreement is that there's certain things I would never say, oh, you have an infection, like just meditate it away. I'd be like, "Oh, no, you should probably go get that like, let's go get an antibiotic or something,
Yes.
go get that checked out."
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
even my husband will say, "Oh, you're in the hospital for, complications of high blood pressure. Here, let's treat this serious thing in the now." And then he may say, "Have you ever explored maybe some more mind body practices? Like meditation has been shown to be phenomenal for high blood pressure." And so, is there something where, I can use my knowledge in the now to work on the symptom, but then can we use some of these, more broad, I say holistic in its true meaning of like, all encompassing holistic, not kind of like, MLM, quote holistic, but, not, bad holistic, but like kind of whole body, whole person. Can you incorporate some of that into your everyday life so then you don't have to come back and see me for these complications again?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the sweet spot,
I
and
like that.
that's where I've personally landed. Like, the
Uh,
door is always
yeah.
open
Yeah.
to all traditional, medicine, but also the door is open to, like, other things too.
Yeah. That's balanced. I like it.
I don't know, I just try. Maybe it's just the Gemini in me that I just don't ever wanna commit to, like, one side or another.
Oh man, I'm thoroughly enjoying our conversation. I know we're getting close to our hour together, and you probably have children that are going, "Mom, where are you, Mom?"
Well, no,
Um,
I have some extra time if you do,
okay,
because I love chatting.
cool, cool. I wanna know more about what your all unconventional job is. I noticed that I went on your Instagram page and your handle is yoga for you online. And you have as your kind of like key pointers that podcast is called Mindful in Minutes. And you're the founder of Yoga for You and you're a meditation teacher. And you have ERYT 500 and you're in the Twin Cities. And your website is yogaforyouonline.com. And I also noticed that you have a meditation teacher training. And actually, when I saw that, I think you used some terminology that was like an unconventional meditation teacher training or something of that nature, or unique, like you've come up with a new format that you're
Mhm.
working with. Can you just tell me a little bit about what you do? Like, what is your job? What is your unconventional job?
Yeah, so my unconventional job is, if someone says, "What do you do?" I'll say, "Oh, I run a location independent yoga and meditation school." But there's so many different things that fall under that. So the biggest part of my work right now is my podcast. I actually have two. I have Mindful in Minutes and then Meditation Mama. They're both guided meditations. Mindful in Minutes was the first one. It's the one that's 7 years old. Meditation Mama was one when I had a pandemic pregnancy with my son and I was just at home and sick. And I was like, you know what? I'm meditating a lot while I'm pregnant. So why not, start sharing those on the internet for people who are in the fertility prenatal postpartum phase, that really specific window in their life. And, that podcast has turned into books. So I've written a couple of books under kind of the Mindful in Minutes umbrella. But really, what I do
Mindful Minutes? Is that the,
Mindful in Minutes. So that's my podcast. But it's
if
turned
I
into a book series, which I'm
go
really proud
on
of.
Amazon? Is that where I'd find
And
Mindful Minutes
yeah,
books?
Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Target, you
Wow.
know,
Very
the
cool.
places.
How
Yeah,
cool.
there's my little book babies. That was kind of the latest thing that I've been doing. Because anyone who has written a book, it really does kind of feel like you're, growing this thing and then
Birthing
giving birth to it. Yeah. But I really like to, in terms of kind of the unique or like signature style that I have and in my teacher trainings is I like to be the person that goes and has the hyperfixations, lives with the monks, reads the books, studies the things, weed through all the noise and pull out the pieces and then say, here, yoga teacher, here, therapist, here, school teacher. I have so many really cool professions that take my meditation teacher training because I like to weed through all the noise and be like, you know what? If you want to just start teaching meditation and sharing these tools and you don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars and 500 hours and all this time to learn one specific style, here's the pertinent pieces that you need to know to be able to start sharing meditation with people and deepen your own practice. I kind of call it like the mindful minutes method. And I apply that also to yoga nidra and restorative yoga as well. And so I like to give people kind of that foundational base of like, here's how you can learn this one really specific thing and then apply it to what you're already doing, whether it's teaching yoga or, anything else.
Very
So,
cool. Like if I wanted
yeah.
to take your meditation training, is it the type
Mhm.
that is online that I just start
Yes.
anytime I want? Or is it like a
You
specific set date where you have everybody
so there
start? Yeah.
Yeah, so it is done at your own pace, but I do certain enrollment periods. So I just, we're recording it in the summer. So I closed enrollment at the beginning of the summer because I wanted to focus on being with my kids this summer. So I closed enrollment and then I'll open it up again in the fall because there is a final project component, which everyone panics about. And they're like, oh no, a final project. It's really not a big deal. But I personally review all of them. And so I periodically will close enrollment because I want to make sure I can be present with my students and,
Yeah.
review their projects.
Cool. That's awesome. And do you feel like your career path, you made mention that once you finished your traditional schooling, you're able to kind of niche out a career path such as you're in that works really well with just the way you work. What intricacies in the way you work do you think has really melded or meshed so well with this particular job that you have?
I think one thing that really serves me well is that I'm just the right amount of reckless or I'm just the right amount of bold. Like, even when I emailed you and I was like, hey, I stumbled across your podcast. I love what you're doing. Do you want to chat? Like, you do when you can, when you have ADHD, be somewhat impulsive. And it kind of gets a bad rap for being like reckless. I like to think of it as like just the right amount of impulsive where you're like, oh, I really like this podcast. Like, I like your vibe. I'll just send him an email and be like, hey, do you want to chat? Maybe you'll say no, but maybe you'll say yes. And there's been so many times where that served me really well,
Mm,
where I have just the right amount of impulsivity, or I think like, I don't know how to do that, but I'm pretty sure I could figure it out.
mm,
And that is kind of an ADHD component. And I think that a traditional schooling system for me was really tough because what what tends to stick with me and resonate with me is the stuff that I find to be really interesting. So if I have to learn something just to kind of learn it and regurgitate it, that's really hard for me to do. Also, I really struggle with like foreign languages. Now I know, it's because I had dyslexia as well. Um, and so being able to have more freedom and to work on my schedule to be able to pursue something that I find to be really interesting. And I think having such a tough time in a traditional schooling system has actually made me a really strong teacher and I'm really proud of my courses. But I think my ability to sometimes break things down and explain them in a digestible way was learned through my own experiences of having a hard time learning. I think it really made me a better teacher, both on the mat or on the meditation cushion, but also when I like teach these continued ed trainings, because I had such a hard time absorbing information. So I had to learn how to kind of reteach myself.
yes. Well, what an inspirational story. I am so happy that you reached out to me and wasn't shy about it. I didn't in any way think that you were being overbearing at all. I was so excited to receive your email because I'm always loving meeting other people that are doing the same sort of stuff and podcasting and talking and I love the spontaneity of reaching out to somebody I do not know at all and then just waiting to see like and if they don't respond and to not get upset if they don't respond is a really great place to land. So I agree with you. It's so cool to hear how you are managing being a mom, a wife, a content creator slash self-employed entrepreneur, blending in your passion for yoga and meditation, being able to get focused enough to write a book. I want to write a book, baby. I want to birth a new baby.
Well,
My
go
wife,
do
my,
it. What's stopping you? I promise you, if
I
I can
don't.
do it, I've done it twice. If I
I'm
can
gonna
do it
have
even
you
one
coach me.
time,
I might have you coach me because I do believe I can do it. I just feel like I need
yeah.
somebody to like break down a little chat, like a little steps, like Todd, do this, get
Mhm.
that done, come back to me, and I'll tell you what to do next. Like if I had that kind of a coaching situation, I think I could probably pull it out. But I sit down, I go, gosh, book will be amazing. Okay, and I get my thing out, my notes out, my pages,
Yeah.
wherever I start typing. I get about a paragraph down, and then I start. I just need to get really clear about where I'm gonna go with it,
Yeah.
and
What
be
would you write? What's
oh,
the book that's in your heart?
oh gosh, thank you.
Tell me.
It really is a dream. I want to use my life story. I want to tell my story. I want to tell
Mhm.
my story from my childhood up to where I am now. Yeah. I feel like my story is fairly interesting. I went through some pretty amazing things and some really difficult things, so I want to share that. And I guess
Yeah.
I get tripped up on how much of that is my ego, how much is that me with my unresolved sort of therapeutic elements where I'm like, I mean, on some levels, I feel like if when I write, it's therapy. It helps me to like process. And if I'm writing about traumatic events, then it's very cathartic and therapeutic. However, the thought of releasing that to the public, I don't know where to draw that line. I just don't feel comfortable yet in that territory
Mhm.
because I also, because my children, if I share the really traumatic stuff, I feel like I don't want to discolor their world. I want them to come up and be able to just like look back and say, Dad was cool. And I don't know that I want them to know all the trauma stuff. And so, but I know that that could be very like freeing and it could work out really great, but I'm still a little nervous about that. I'm still a little nervous. And then, there's so much to it. I mean, thank you for asking. And
Yeah.
I don't want to take a ton of time digging into my
No, well,
psyche,
it
but
sounds like maybe you should write it for you first.
mm,
Or just sort of like casual one thing I've started doing at night is, a little bit of creative writing. I've been trying to do more things just for fun,
mm,
not for any kind of
mm,
real reason, and one thing I've gotten into is, like, poetry, just totally just, for funsies, and so I'll just kinda whatever. I don't journal to, like, recap my day. I'll, like, write, like, a
mm.
little poem. The other day I wrote, you can take this part out if it's a little bit too weird, but I just for fun, I would never, like, share you can feel free to just
You
delete
can
this
edit
part,
this.
but
I'm definitely not
I was
editing it out.
oh, I was like I was writing this poem, and it was about the scream, and I was reflecting on my birth story, and it was basically how it was such it clicked in my mind that, like, as I was screaming, giving birth is, where you have permission to just delete this part out, but then your child and, I imagine you were there for the birth of your children, and it was how this scream was a scream of for me, was transferred to my baby, but it was the last scream that I had before I became a mother, so it was a death of me, and then that scream was transferred to, my son was born and his first, scream because they come out, screaming, and that was his, like, first scream of his birth, and it's just like this little poem about a scream, and will I ever share it with, anyone? No. Is that ever gonna see the light of day? No. That was for me just making that little click of like, "Oh,
Nice.
how interesting," like,
Yeah, that is cool though. I like that
but it's
correlation.
just for fun, so maybe you
Yeah.
just write for fun and it'll help you process, and then you can always do something with it later.
Yeah. I think you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, just have
Appreciate
fun with it.
it. Good advice. Just have fun. Come on, stop being so hard on yourself. Have some
Yeah, and
fun.
writing too
Lighten
is
up.
like it
Yeah.
can be so beautiful and so special, and a lot of what we write, I'm sure your writing is much better than mine, but a lot of what you write, it's just like you get it out and then you're like, "Oh, that's not that great," but also, like, it doesn't matter. It's just like the act of it, and then sometimes something comes out and it is great, and it's just, you kinda let it out, and then you don't have to worry about, like, an outline for your book or, having it you just
Mm,
start writing to
mm,
write and then
mhm.
and then see what comes out. You could always piece it together later.
Yeah, great point. I'm doing it.
Do it.
Yep,
I believe in you.
done. That's amazing, Kelly. I'm so thankful. I really appreciate you reaching out. I can't wait to continue to follow you everybody listening, go follow Kelly on her channels and send her a message, send her an email if you enjoyed this. Let her know you appreciate her time. And I think you did a great job, Kelly. You're a very clear speaker. You have a great job of formulating your idea and following through and communicating it. You're a gifted communicator. I love hearing how you've turned what seems like a challenge like into your greatest gift. And I think that's so inspirational. And you have like a really positive sort of spirit, like a vibe, which is really kind of infectious and quite refreshing. And I'm so thankful to have this chance to meet you. And I hope we can collaborate together in the future.
That is, like, the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing this space with me. I know, I'd sent this in my email, but I know how sacred a space a podcast is, and so I do not take for granted the fact that you would, share this space with me, and I've had so much fun chatting with you. It's just so fun to chat with someone who loves, like, what we love.
Yes, agreed.
Amazing.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I wish you a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks. You too.